You ever notice that a lot of times we treat people differently depending upon their age or social status or any various different reasons? Well, today on Daily Renewal, we're going to be talking about how we should be treating people. Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Lyle, and welcome to Daily Renewal. Today, I want to talk to you about how we treat one another. And more importantly, I guess I want to put it in the context of being a Christian, how we need to look at things in the context of dealing with other believers. You know, as a pastor of a church, I realize that a lot of times, I've been at different churches, and sometimes, we can get into a place where going to church becomes kind of mechanical, where, I've heard people say, they go to church, or somebody goes to a church for a weekend just to visit, and the first experience that they recall is that nobody even said hi. Well, if you're in a church that's that unfriendly, then that's probably not a good thing, especially considering when we look at the New Testament. They had, as the church was growing in the New Testament, they had thousands of people that sometimes that would make a commitment to the Lord. So the church was growing exponentially, and yet there still seemed to be an amount of love within the church. When we forget what this is all about, and it becomes mechanical, then some problems begin to occur. So for us, we want to look at what Paul was instructing Timothy, a young pastor, on how he needs to guide the people in his congregation, or the people that he was walking his walk with God with. How they needed to treat some of these situations involving dealing with other people. Because in dealing with other people, we've got all these personalities, all these different backgrounds, all these different issues. I mean, everybody that comes to church has baggage. It's just a matter of how much. And so we pick it up in 1 Timothy chapter 5. And we're going to be dealing with this probably the rest of the week, on different situations and dealing with different people. Well, the first one he mentions here, he says, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters with all purity. So the first one he talks about here is he talks about not rebuking an older man. If it's one thing that I've learned over the years that I've been on the planet, and it isn't just within the church, but in life in general, somebody that's been on the planet a lot longer than me usually has some things that they can share with me that will benefit my life. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's got it. The older you get, the more things you get figured out. But I tend to find that as we age, there is a lot of things that we've encountered over the years that we've been here, that sometimes there's a lot of lessons that are learned by older individuals. And within the church setting, talking about both older men and older women, in treating them like a father, the thing that sticks out to me the most is the idea of respecting somebody that's gone through things. And often, when we look at people in the church, the older they get, a lot of times we think they have nothing to offer. Well, that's actually the furthest from the truth. In fact, if somebody is a mature believer, they probably have more to offer than most, if not all, people in the church. So we should, by honoring them, we'd be able to draw some of those things out. And ultimately, what happens with people that are older is, us that are younger, if we are respecting them and honoring them, and this goes for both men and women, they have so much deposit they can make in your life if you treat them properly. I've often submitted myself to men that I know that have gone on before me in the faith, and tried to keep a humble posture before God and before them, because I know that I can glean some things that are going to help me. So you benefit by honoring the older people in the church, but not only that, by you submitting yourself and asking them and kind of stirring up the gifting of God in them by asking them, how do they deal with things? What it does with the older members of the congregation is it actually helps them spiritually as well, because then they start to realize that there is a need for them in the congregation. And everybody in a congregation, if we look at how there's many references to the people of God being a family, well, every member of the family can be a contributor. It doesn't matter how weak or how strong. And so by honoring those that are older in our midst, we empower them, but we also empower ourselves because we glean from them. The second group here that we see is the idea of it says younger men as brothers and younger women as sisters. Well, for me as a man, when I look at some of the people that are not the older ones in the congregation, say my age or even a little younger, the fact is that a lot of them are still growing. I'm still growing in my walk with God. Hopefully we all are. But by treating them as a brother, we're bringing honor to them, because often, we look at in church, often we tend to look at people's, how charismatic they are, how what their personality is like. And there's people in our congregations that maybe don't have a real outgoing personality. And oftentimes in church, people can get lost in the shuffle. And if you look at somebody as a brother, well, what does that mean? That means you actually care about them. In your congregation, is there people that have kind of been singled out that maybe don't have many people that spend time with them? Well, if that was your actual earthly brother or your biological brother, how would you feel about that? I know many families. I'm an only child myself, but I've watched and observed, especially like with my wife's family, it's amazing how when one is struggling, the other will do their best to try to compensate and try to help them in situations. And any of you that have brothers and sisters, if you're the older one, I guarantee you've seen situations where somebody was maybe picking on your younger brother or sister, and what's your response? You want to see the best for them. You defend them. You do what you can to empower them to be the best they can be. And so that's an indicator as well of how you're doing in your relationship with, how do you look at people who are within your congregation or people that you know are Christians? Do you do your best to empower them and bring out the best in them? And the last part about that is it also notice it says he's talking to a young man here, and he says you're to treat your younger women as sisters, and then it ends with all purity. This is really important because I've seen this one happen often. Church, I know there's a lot of people that maybe come with wrong motives to church. Some people might think, guys might think, well, if I'm going to find a good, wholesome girl, I need to come to church. Well, hopefully that's true to a point. But if the only reason you're coming is to scout out the territory and for your future marriage prospect, and in fact, if you're going to church just to look for marriage prospects, even if you think you're a strong believer, you need to be very careful, because that is your sister. And that being the case, you need to make sure that you respect that young lady. And ladies, it goes the other way as well. So having said that, we're talking about the idea of relationships. Well, this idea of relationships, it's ultimately, if you keep in mind that you're trying to bring value to people, whether it's the older or the younger in this situation, in all situations, you need to approach it as, am I bringing value to people? In your local church, is there ways you might not be in what you consider full-time ministry? You might not be called to be a pastor or be on salary at the church. And I mean, a lot of those things, people seek those things, and it's wrong to seek unless the Lord really puts it on your heart. And even then, there's ways to do that, especially considering everybody, as I mentioned earlier, everybody in the family plays a role. So is there people in your congregation that you can bring value to? That's an important ministry. That's an important ministry in all of our lives. So look for people that you can bring value to. Find ways to bring value to them. Well, how can I do that, Pastor Lau? Well, I can tell you there's a couple simple things. Get to know somebody's name. Approach them. And I'm going to tell you that you might, if you're one of those people, you go up and you get somebody's name and you're so busy, you're so focused on introducing yourself that right after they tell you their name, you forget their name. Well, I can tell you, if you really want to honor them, you might have to go up to them 3 times, but they would rather do that and get the name than the first time you meet them, you forget their name, and from then on you avoid them because you can't remember their name. That's pride, by the way. Don't be prideful. Get to know them. They're important. They're a part of your family. Don't worry about how it looks, and if they're immediately offended, pray for them. But understand, you can play a vital role in the family just by burying your pride and bringing value to people. There's a couple points in Matthew 7:12 and Luke 6:31. I'll read from Luke 6:31. It says, "And just as you want men to do to you, you also to do to them likewise." Now, this is often referred to as the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And this is a great rule to go by when you're dealing with people. And I will also give you another one that we see in Jewish culture called the silver rule. I actually did an episode on this that you can look up on YouTube, and did a whole episode on what's called the silver rule. And it's very like the golden rule. The golden rule, do unto others, you'd have them do unto you. But the silver rule is, don't do to other people the things you wouldn't want them to do to you. Again, that's a paraphrase, but very, very close. That's basically the gist of what the silver rule is. In all of these things, it's putting someone else before you. And these are key things to not only seeing you grow spiritually, but to help others grow spiritually. And ultimately, God's desire is for his family to grow together so that we all give the Holy Spirit opportunity to mold and shape us into the image of Christ. Well, I hope you got something out of that today. I just want to encourage you, if you get something out of these videos, share them with as many people as you can. You can. It helps if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, we're on Twitter and Instagram, and feel free to comment below. It's great to get dialogue going so that you can tell us what you think of some of these videos. So having said that, God bless you and have a great day.